Well, guys, the biggest news when it comes to Sorceress is the unique they received. It's very unique indeed. Check out what it does. The Oculus gained the effect of the Teleport Enchantment for free. When you evade using Teleport Enchantment, you are taken to a random location. What the hell is a random location? Well, Sorcerer players on Reddit have come up with some ideas. Path of Exile in Baldur's Gate 3, because they are leaving Diablo 4. Now, besides the outrage with the unique, which honestly is an early April Fool's joke, let's be real, one of the strongest Sorcerer passives was nerfed, which is Devouring Blaze. Check this out. Devouring Blaze bonus critical strike damage reduced from up to 30% bonus damage down to 21%, and the bonus critical strike damage to Immobilized reduced from 75%, huge, to 30%, more than a 50% nerf. Absolutely insane. This was basically the enchantment that every single sorceress would go. They'd get the Firebolt enchantment so that enemies are burning so that they could get Devouring Blaze and get this massive critical strike damage, which was huge, right? And they reduced that damage, unfortunately, by a massive amount. So not only that, but sorcerers also are going to suffer from a bug fix that has massively reduced sorcerer damage. Check this out. The notes read, fixed an issue where Aspect of Control was applying its damage bonus 3 times for staggered bosses, aka Blizzard fixed an issue where players were having fun. Aspect of Control makes the sorcerer deal 25 to 30% more damage to frozen, stunned, or immobilized enemies. This damage bonus would apply 3 times, right, those 3 different ailments, to staggered bosses because staggered bosses have every single type of CC on them when they're staggered, which would include frozen, stunned, and immobilized. So this bonus would apply 3 times. However, this is now going to apply only once. So this is a massive 70% damage nerf to Aspect of Control against staggered bosses for sorcerers. Massive, huge nerf indeed. Now, I'm leaving the sorcerer behind because might as well just remove the class, right? If we want to talk about the patch notes in general, summarized, you don't want to see all the other classes, I would just say all classes were nerfed. Hell Tides are going to take you longer to complete and they're less rewarding. Boosting is nerfed to the absolute ground. It basically doesn't exist anymore. And doing content other than Nightmare Dungeons for leveling just doesn't really make sense because the experience bonus for killing monsters higher level than you was massively nerfed. Basically over like 98% nerfed. Huge XP nerfs. Not only that, but damage all around was nerfed. Critical strike and vulnerable damage nerfs were at 17 to 40% respectively, not counting the nerf to different affixes to certain weapons. Damage reduction has been reduced across multiple abilities and aspects, specifically Aspect of the Disobedient. Basically, if you are trying to get more armor, it's been nerfed. If Storm Strike gives you DR, it's giving you less now. So across aspects and different abilities, everyone is going to take more damage after this patch. So those are basically high-level changes. If you want more detail, I'm going to go very briefly through each of the different classes. Next up, the Rogue. The Rogue's unique actually sounds pretty fun, if you ask me. It's pretty actually unique and fun, like a unique should be. It's called Eagle Horn. It says Penetrating Shot has a 30 to 80% chance to fire an arrow that bounces off walls and scenery. Hitting enemies from behind with Penetrating Shot will make them vulnerable for 3 seconds. So this actually sounds fun to me. I know Rogues are basically Twisting Blades or Go Home, but I think this is actually a really fun build. I know there's other ones out there, but you know, S tier is Twisting Blades. I think Eagle Horn could be a lot of fun, but I don't play a ton of Rogue, so I don't know how well it's really going to be. However, despite that awesome unique, Rogues actually took a massive nerf, like all the other classes. Siphoning Strikes now requires a lucky hit chance of 75%. Oof. This passive was key to Rogue survival. This passive healed the Rogue for 3% of max life when they get a critical strike in melee range. Basically the same nerf given to Druid's Masochism. This will make it proc much less often. Instead of every single crit getting 3% of your max life back, it's only some crits. This coupled with the nerfed Aspect of Disobedience that we just talked about makes Rogues much less able to survive than ever before. Warning to all those hardcore players. Not only that, but because of the sweeping damage affix nerfs, Rogues got hit hard and are dealing less damage than ever before. To end on a positive note, the new aspect coming out actually sounds kind of cool for the Rogue. Pestilent Points is an offensive aspect that says every third cast of Puncture is poison imbued with 100 to 150% of normal potency. I think Puncture is a fun skill, and this aspect sounds fun to pair with. Will it be good? I think it could be, considering Poison Trap Twisting Blades Rogue is top tier, and there are some poison passive skills in that build, which I think would work well. well with this. Moving on to Druid. Now, one of those changes is the introduction of a new aspect that I'm actually really excited about. It's called Subterranean Aspect. This is going to make Poison Creeper's activation also cast Landslide in a circle around you, and Earth skills are going to deal 10 to 20% increased damage to poisoned enemies. This is a huge change for the Druid. If you remember way back to when I was first planning out how to play the Earth Druid in Diablo 4 first coming out, I definitely was very focused around Stormstrike and Landslide and Poison Creeper for getting those terra motes when you cast Poison Creeper. When you activate it, it immobilizes everyone, right? And that gives your Landslide guaranteed critical strikes. With this change, I think we can hold on to Poison Creeper the entire time with this build, which is really exciting. So I'm excited to put together some new build guides. Don't forget to subscribe if you want to see those for Season of the Malignant. Really excited about this new aspect, and I'm really excited to play Druid again in Season 1. So if you want to check that out, see how I put it together, don't forget to check me out on Twitch. I will be streaming on the release date, Thursday the 20th. So that's the one big change I'm really excited about. We're keeping Poison Creeper if we're playing Earth Druid. Really excited about that. And there's a lot of synergies with that, like Pack Leader. If you get a critical strike, you actually have a chance to reset the cooldowns on your companion skills. So that's actually really great with Landslide's guaranteed critical strikes. There's a lot of really fun stuff that I'm really excited to discover coming in Season 1. Another aspect that was changed, unfortunately a nerf, was Aspect of Disobedience. If you're familiar with Diablo 4, you know about this aspect. This is a really powerful defensive aspect. This actually made it so that your maximum armor was increased by 50% if you got a perfect roll, which is a massive amount. Armor is just so good, decreasing the damage you take from physical and all elemental damage. So this was nerfed. The new maximum amount of armor reduction is now 30%. So this means that your ability to really be tanky or really just reduce your damage in general in Diablo 4 has been reduced in Season 1. A lot of people are pissed off about this, but honestly, we have to test it to be sure. Of course, no one likes to be able to die easier, but we're just going to have to see. Maybe there's a better defensive aspect now, but this was really just the best in slot for pretty much everyone. So of course, Blizzard went after it. Another nerf that is going to probably make a lot of Druid players probably a little bit upset was Symbiotic Aspect cooldown reduction being reduced. Now, previously, this was a perfect aspect for reducing the cooldown of things like Earthen Bulwark, reducing Trample for that really strong Trample slide build, also for that low health Earthen Bulwark build. You could basically get your Earthen Bulwark down to 0 cooldown, right? If you stacked cooldown reduction and you also got a perfect roll of Symbiotic Aspect, because it reduces your cooldown. This has been reduced from 4 to 8 seconds that you could take off your cool skills to 3 to 5 seconds. So it's actually much worse. It has a lower minimum roll and a much lower maximum roll. So the most you can take off a skill is 5 seconds. This is going to probably really invalidate a lot of different builds. Definitely that Earthen Bulwark build. You can't just constantly cast Earthen Bulwark over and over. Trample slides is severely nerfed because of this. This symbiotic aspect, I'll admit I didn't really take full advantage of it. I didn't really play around with it as much as I wish I did, but basically those builds are probably somewhat invalidated now. You know, I can't confirm that, but I know that if you really wanted to be able to cast those abilities without a cooldown, you needed a perfect roll on Symbiotic Aspect. That new perfect roll is massively reduced, almost by 50%, in fact. So that is 2 nerfs and 1 new aspect. So that is going to affect current builds. There's some skill changes as well that are going to affect current builds. Again, filtering out any of the inconsequential stuff. Number 1, the most important skill change, in my opinion, is that Grizzly Rage, when you got Prime Grizzly Rage, it made it so it granted you Unstoppable for the duration. That no longer is true. It will now only grant you Unstoppable for 6 seconds instead of while active. So after you use Grizzly Rage, and for 6 seconds after you use it, you're going to be unstoppable. However, after those 6 seconds, you're going to be susceptible to crowd control again. This is a massive nerf in my opinion. Things like Tornado Druid, where you were a Grizzly Werewolf, it was really your only form of crowd control escape. You didn't have Earthen Bulwark, you didn't have Trample, you didn't have other things to get you out of crowd control, and so having that Grizzly Rage was very important in order to honestly play your character, because when you start doing nightmare dungeons, like there's so much CC in them. And so this was your way of remaining uncrowd controllable during your ultimate's duration. No longer, however, you can only be uncrowd controllable for 6 seconds while this is active. This is a massive nerf. It's going to make me trend towards Earth builds now, I think, for Season 1, because Earth builds have Earthen Bulwark for Unstoppable, Trample for Unstoppable, and you can still go Grizzly Rage for 6 seconds of Unstoppable. So I'd rather have more Unstoppable unstoppable than not. I mean, who wants to not have control of their character, right? And so I think a lot of people are also upset about this change. However, I'm just going to change the builds that I play because of this change. Another nerf that hit the druids that's going to affect the builds you play is Stormstrike was nerfed. The damage reduction granted from it was reduced from 25% to 15%. This is pretty significant. It's a 10% DR reduction. Stormstrike was just so good. It's the best basic skill. It's still the best basic skill, let's be honest. It's just so good. They did buff Claw, but whatever, it's not significant. But Stormstrike damage reduction reduced is significant. It's 10% DR you're losing. So I did want to mention things like Storm Druid, Storm Claw Druid, Shred Druid, things. Anyone that uses Stormstrike is going to feel this 10% DR loss. This is in addition to Aspect of Disobedience nerf. So the damage reductions are all kind of being nerfed if you've kind of noticed that trend. But they actually did buff Tornado, which came to a huge surprise to me. I was fully anticipating Tornado would be nerfed, considering it's the best Druid spec right now, where you can just go Stormwolf Tornado and just spam tornadoes and just down pretty much anything in a matter of seconds. Tornado damage was increased from 19% to 23%. Very small buff, but still a buff nonetheless. And honestly, a buff is better than a nerf, so I will take it. Very happy about that, honestly. Now, the fourth big skill change that I actually really like, and probably some people might not care, but Provocation is something that is in the, it's a bear skill passive. It says you get a guaranteed overpower after a certain number of seconds that you remain in bear form. Now, most people didn't get this. Actually, this was nerfed at one point, but they actually are kind of walking that back, strangely enough, and they're buffing it again. Check this out. Provocation threshold required for guaranteed overpower reduced from 35 seconds to 24 seconds at rank 1, getting that down to 16 seconds. Still, it's not the best, but a guaranteed overpower is a guaranteed overpower, and it's really awesome. Now, this is actually sort of in limbo, I would say. Is this a significant enough buff to encourage players to actually get Insatiable Fury instead of a legendary aspect in the chest slot? I don't know, but it's definitely because you have to be in bear form, right, for that amount of time. And mounting up takes you into human form, which takes away from the amount of time you're in bear form to get this proc. So is it good enough yet? I don't know, to be honest. Maybe not. Just because whenever you mount up, you're going to lose being in bear form. Insatiable Fury, you lose that aspect spot. Don't know if it's enough. And finally, they nerfed a spirit boon that almost everyone used, Masochistic. This gave you a 2% of your max life back anytime you had a critical strike. So this was so good for keeping it full health pretty much all the time. This paired with Earth and Might, which gave you guaranteed critical strikes, basically gave you so much life back. It was amazing. They nerfed it. They ruined it. Just kidding. Masochistic now also requires a lucky hit chance of 75%. This is going to reduce the amount of times this occurs by roughly, I don't know, 25%. I don't really know exactly the math, but it's going to happen less often, I can tell you that much. So kind of a bummer. I really like the Masochistic spirit boon, but now it's nerfed. Now it's not going to happen as often when you get those critical strikes. How much less often, I can't say for sure, but if you play a build with like Landslide and you're like a bear and you're getting guaranteed critical strikes, you're probably still going to get a good number of them because it's on critical strike. So it's probably still pretty good, honestly. Hopefully they don't nerf it into oblivion, but we'll see. And finally, there is a new unique called Flesh Render. It's a unique one-handed mace, which says Debilitating Roar and Blood Howl deal damage to nearby poisoned enemies. How much damage? We don't know exactly, but at level 850 item level, they said it would be like 3,000 to 4,000 damage. So it sounds decent. I think this is going to be strongest with Blood Howl because as you slay enemies, your Blood Howl cooldown gets reduced, and so you can cast it over and over. Not to mention, werewolf skills will have that poison damage on crit thanks to Toxic Claws. And so I think Blood Howl, Toxic Claws, Flesh Render could be a thing where you're spamming Blood Howls to deal damage to those poisoned enemies over and over, and they're constantly poisoned from critical strikes with Toxic Claws and so on. And so I think it's probably how that's going to work. Will this be better than Accelerating Aspect? I don't know. Flesh Render sounds pretty good on paper, but something like Accelerating Aspect giving you 25% attack speed is really good. It is a one-hander, so you could keep an offensive aspect in your offhand, like a totem or something. But I don't know. How good is Flesh Render truly going to be? I can't say for sure. We're going to have to test it. Don't forget to click that follow button on Twitch to see me play some Druid in Season 1 and figure out all those answers. And don't forget to subscribe on YouTube if you aren't already. Next up is the Barbarian. So number one, the most important thing that they just changed was, and I'm going to read this directly from the patch notes, fixed an issue where the outer edge of the quakes granted to Hammer of the Ancients via the aspect of Ancestral Echoes was dealing far more damage than intended. Developers note, we recognize this adjustment is a significant decrease to the Hammer of the Ancients Barbarian build, but we do not want its strength to be reliant on an underlying bug. Now, first of all, it's not Aspect of Ancestral Echoes that grants quakes to Hammer of the Ancients. It's actually Aspect of Ancestral Force. Second, this is absolutely going to significantly change the power rankings of Barbarian builds, making Hammer of the Ancients less powerful than the alternatives. And by the way, Hammer of the Ancients was the only S tier build Barbarians had, so it seems like developers have nerfed Barbarian's best build and given them no alternative. Now, that's not the only thing that they have decided to change. One of the biggest changes is actually Hamstring. It now only slows healthy enemies, and the slow amount has been increased. Now, of course, the slow amount is pointless. It's just the fact that it had given a slow that gives things like No Mercy bonus damage. Check out what No Mercy does. 9% increased critical strike chance against slowed, immobilized, or stunned enemies. If Hamstring is no longer causing bleeding enemies to become slowed, No Mercy no longer gives you that 9% critical strike chance. However, I do think that potentially they are nerfing this because they're introducing a new aspect for the Barbarian, which is called Audacity. This is a utility aspect which says when there are at least 5 close enemies, stun them for 2 to 4 seconds. This can only occur once every 20 seconds. This is much worse than Hamstring, if you ask me. Yes, it's a stun, which is damage mitigation. However, it only happens once every 20 seconds, and so I don't think it's actually good enough to give back what Hamstring used to give Barbarians. So if you look at the patch notes, I think the Barbarians got hit pretty hard, and the Audacity aspect seems to not really give them what they just lost. Not only that, but Barbarians are also getting another aspect called Ancestral Charge, which is an offensive aspect. Charge calls forth 4 Ancients who also charge, dealing 50 to 100% of normal damage. Now, no serious Barbarian build currently uses Charge, so this seems like Blizzard's attempt to make Barbs use this ability, like force them with this new aspect. I think this aspect could be good. It sounds like it will do a lot of damage, right? 4 multiplied by 50 to 100% normal damage, if that is actually how it works. I think it has some potential, but right now Charge just doesn't fit into any build, and so it seems kind of forced. I'm not sure if this is actually going to be beneficial to Barbarians. And finally, a generic that was nerfed that I think is going to impact Barbarians significantly is Aspect of Disobedience. This was nerfed. The maximum stacks were reduced from 100 to 60, reducing the maximum bonus armor granted from the max of 50% to a max of 30%. This is unfortunate because Barbarians really needed damage reduction and bonus armor to survive. They're always in melee range, and so I think this nerf is going to disproportionately affect Barbarian players, really hurting their survivability. I'm not sure how viable or how easily Barbarians are going to survive come season 1. Now, finally, a buff. I think this actually could be something. Enhanced Death Blow's damage bonus to bosses increased from 100% to 150%. Death Blow was often used when leveling using Hammer of the Ancients, so I could see this getting more use in the future potentially, especially now that Wrath Glyph's bonus affects all damage instead of just core skills. So maybe there's a glimmer of hope there for Death Blow, but that really wasn't used in any end game builds, so I'm not really sure how much of a difference it's going to make. And then finally, we learned that Barbarians are getting a new unique item called Azure Wrath. It's a unique sword that has lucky hit. Your core skills have up to a 20% chance to freeze enemies for 3 seconds and deal cold damage to them. The developers say that at 820 item power, Azure Wrath deals between 3,000 to 7,000 damage roughly. Now, Azure Wrath hopefully might have a better lucky hit affix in the future, like lucky hit developers won't ruin your class, but we'll have to see about that. And last, the Necromancer. Now, one of the biggest things actually were the big sweeping changes to vulnerability and critical strike damage, which is where Bone Necromancers actually derive a lot of their damage from. Not only were they affected by these sweeping changes, however, but Blizzard also nerfed some of their most powerful aspects, like Splintering Bone aspects. The Bone Shard damage bonus was reduced from 50 to 100% to 30 to 60%. This is a massive decrease in damage to Splintering aspect. Not only that, Osseous Gale aspect bonus storm duration was increased from 4 to 8 to 5 to 10 seconds. This is actually going to make Bone Storm better, but one of the key abilities for the Bone Necromancer was actually Aspect of Grasping Veins. The critical strike damage bonus was reduced from 30 to 60% to 20 to 40%. And so we're losing critical strike damage bonus in addition to critical strike damage bonus already being reduced overall. Now, not only that, but they also nerfed one of the Bone Necromancer passive skills called Evulsion. It says Evulsion bonus damage to vulnerable reduced from 612-18 to 510-15. So that's roughly, at max 3% less damage to vulnerable. Vulnerable damage is huge, and again, that was nerfed overall. overall. On top of that, they actually buffed Bone Prison. Now this isn't always used in Bone Necromancer builds, but Bone Prison's initial essence gain increased from 15 to 25, which actually I think is going to be significant because even though Bone Necromancer was quite significantly nerfed in this patch, they also kind of buffed Blight Necromancer. I think Blight Necromancer is going to be the top build for Necromancers in Season 1. The reason I think that is because check out some of the buffs they did to some of the Blight Necromancer aspects, like aspect of Ultimate Shadow. Damage increase from 0.16 to 0.22 to 0.43 to 0.48. This is like more than double. This is like triple. This is just about triple damage. So aspect of Ultimate Shadow damage has been increased dramatically. They also increased the aspect of Plunging Darkness bonus damage from 50 to 100 to 75 to 125%. So these are two really big buffs made to the Shadow Blight Necromancer. Not only that, but they also buffed Bloodless Scream. Now, Bloodless Scream is a Darkness Necro unique, which says your Darkness skills chill enemies for up to 40%. Lucky hit, your Darkness skills have a 100% chance to generate 2 to 5 additional essence against frozen targets. And so you're chilling them repeatedly because it's damage over time. Eventually they get frozen, and that's going to give you more essence back. On top of that, also, Bone Storm is used by the Blight Necromancer, and so Osseous Gale aspect getting buffed actually fits perfectly into this new Blight Necromancer build. And there's a new unique that's actually going to buff Bone Storm. Check this out. It's called Lidless Wall. It's a unique shield. It says lucky hit while you have an active Bone Storm. Hitting an enemy outside of a Bone Storm has up to a 5 to 25% chance to spawn an additional Bone Storm at their location. Each of your active sacrifice bonuses increases the chance by 25% and the total number of additional Bone Storms you have by +1. So you can have a ton of Bone Storms depending on how many minions you decide to sacrifice with this new unique. This is one of the uniques I'm actually most excited for. This is fantastic. I'm going to put a link in the description to the current best Blight Necro build that I know of. I think Blight Necro is the way to go. It uses all the aspects that were just buffed. It sacrifices all of its minions. Lidless Wall will fit perfectly into this build, and I honestly just think that they're nerfing Bone Necro and saying, hey, go play this new Darkness Necromancer because they're just buffing everything that the Darkness Necro would use. So overall, if I were to summarize these Necromancer changes, I would say nerfs to Bone Necro, buffs to Shadow Blight Necro, and that's basically how the Necro was affected by this patch. Critical strike and vulnerability damage was so severely nerfed in addition to those aspects and skills that honestly I think the Bone Necro is going to be hitting significantly less now after these nerfs. Anyways, guys, that's it for this update. Hope you guys liked it. Don't forget to click that like button and subscribe for more. See you in the next one. Take care.